So we've come to the session about how to build an effective CV. Now this session will go into a lot of detail, and for some of you we might feel that it's too much detail. But given that I look at a lot of CVs and the mistakes that people typically do when they're building a CV, I feel that I really need to go into absolutely every aspect that goes into building an effective CV. So I've divided this presentation into different parts, and I want to start off with really getting you to understand what the purpose of a CV is. So what is a CV for? Now clearly it's a necessary evil of the application process. Most companies might put up a job posting online or ask you to send a CV via email. So clearly it's part of the application process. So you need to build a good CV to be part of the process. Now it's a tool, not a job search strategy. And this is something that you have to have clear from the very beginning. In the action module, I'll go much deeper into what this means, but a CV is basically part of the application process, but it's not necessarily the way that you look for a job. Now, the only purpose of a CV is to get you the interview. The application might also include a cover letter, but the only purpose that this paper serves is to get you the interview. And in that sense, you basically have to limit the information to what the job posting has asked for. Anything which is not part of the job posting in terms of the requirements shouldn't be part of this document. Now, you also really need to understand who's getting this bit of paper. And there's basically two types of audiences. Generally speaking, if you're applying to through an online job posting or to a job posting, the person that's going to receive the CV is human resources. Now, human resources is rarely the real recruiter unless they're looking for a person for their own department. Human resources, what they're doing is to filter for other departments. And you need to understand who these people are. They're basically paid to filter. They have a much more square attitude to the types of profiles that they're looking for. So they usually search on the basis of proven experience, or they're looking for very specific skills, and so you need to reflect that on your CV. Now, against that, the great thing about HR is that they're looking for global fit with a company. So when they're looking at a candidate, they're not only looking for them to fulfill a specific job function, but they're also looking in terms of how their career is going to develop within the company. So they do tend to have a much more global view in the way that they review a CV. Now, there are people that tend to be risk averse because they might get hammered by the line managers if they're not finding the right people. So they do tend to be a lot more narrow-minded in the way that they make the selection. And the one thing that you'll need to understand is that these people speak competency. I'll go into details to what that means, but HR speak a special language, and that's the competency language. And finally, the one good thing about human resources is they tend to read the whole application. A busy line manager might not read your cover letter because they're too busy to read it, but human resources will be reading the CV, they'll also read the cover letter, and they'll be reviewing you throughout the whole process. Now, against that, the person that might receive a CV is also the line manager. And the way that these people view a candidate can be a little bit different from the way that human resources look at them. These guys are the decision maker. They're paid to decide quickly because they've got other things to do. And they usually search on the basis of somebody who can get the job done. So they're not so hung up on past experience or a specific type of knowledge. If you're able to convey to them that you can get the job done, then they're much more likely to make a choice compared to HR. Now, a line manager is very self-interested. He needs somebody to solve whatever problems he has in his own department. So the only thing that he's looking at or she's looking at is fit with a specific job function. So, against the human resources that have a much more global outlook in the way that they look at a candidate, a line manager will only look for, can this person solve my problem? So, they're much more likely to risk because they're much more instinctive in the way that they'll look at a candidate. If you have the right characteristics, they tend to decide much more quickly. And so, instead of speaking competency, they speak character. I'm looking for somebody who can get things done, somebody who can develop relationships. They tend to view a candidate on the basis of those type of things rather than do they have the 4-year sales experience that we're looking for. And finally, compared to the human resources, as I said, they're busy people, so they'll tend to review a CV very quickly and take decisions very quickly. Now, in terms of standing out, let me give you some data. I mean, again, in my interviews with different recruiters, you need to understand the volume of curriculums that human resources are looking at. Last year in April, I met the recruiter for Google, and she's the recruiter for the Dublin office, so just one of the offices of Google worldwide. And the number of applications that they received was 34,000 last year. So we're talking huge volume. So in terms of how your profile is going to stand up versus the other 3,999 people, it's going to be much more difficult. One of my clients in the past was Novartis headquarters, and Danielle, the recruiter, she told me that she was receiving 450 CVs a week. So again, standing out in that process is going to be very difficult. Currently, I deal with the World Bank, and the IFC is a recruiter of MBAs. Last year, for the global transaction team process, they received 2,700 applications for just 6 places. So again, that's what I mean, that the CV is a tool, it's not a job search strategy. You have to put your CV in front of recruiters, but the way of getting a job might be slightly different. So it's not about what you want to get out of it, but what you can really contribute to the company, hopefully in your benefit as well. So you need to focus very much on what are they looking for, and am I addressing that need or not? So what do they need to see? I mean, you can imagine Jane, recruiter for Google, in the headquarters in Dublin, receiving these 34,000 applications. You know, you can imagine what time they dedicate to reviewing each one of these documents. And literally the average is 30 seconds. So first impressions really count. Anything that doesn't look readable will very quickly get discounted because they've got a whole lot of other applications that they can look at. So, is it reader friendly? Is it well laid out? Can they find the information that they need quickly? So you really need to keep this in mind at the time of designing your CV. So, bullet points, something that, allows them to look at sound bites very quickly and digest it very quickly, it's important. Conservative formatting. I mean, if you're applying to an advertising agency, you can allow yourself to be a little bit creative. But if you're Google and you're looking at 34,000 applications, they get impatient with something which is too creative. What they want is something that they can very easily find the information that they're looking for. So, clearly laid out, and then a coherence of date format, so they can very quickly understand what your career progression has been since you started. After that, of course, you have the second impression. So content is really important. So is it content which is relevant to what they're looking for? Are they using generic language, something that a recruiter would normally understand? So you need to understand that most recruiters are industrial psychologists. They're not people that are technical experts. So if you fill your CV with information which is too technical, they won't understand it. So you're not really conveying who you are as a candidate. What they really look for is career progression, because career progression is a sign that you deliver. If you started off as a junior analyst and 2 years later you were put in a position of consultant, and then 2 years later you went to senior consultant, it shows that you really do deliver at work, and therefore you're given increasing responsibility. So have that in mind when you're designing your CV, that if you did have career progression and you change job functions, that needs to be reflected on the CV. Above all, the CV is an aperitif. It's something that really invites a recruiter to say, I want to interview this person. They seem to have done interesting things. I now want to meet them in an interview. So you need to really express your achievements well. And we'll go into detail as to how you can do that. And finally, in the end, you only have one bit of paper, maximum 2 if you're a more experienced profile. So you need to express a variety of skills. If you were a project manager and the CV reads project manager, project manager, project manager, you're not really expressing who you really are as a candidate. So you really need to keep that in mind, that actually you need to use this bit of paper to express a whole variety of skills, so that it shows you as a very complete candidate. Now, your CV is very much your brand. And the analogy I can draw is with the packaging of any product. And undoubtedly, if you go to any supermarket, you go into any shop, packaging has a lot to do with your perception of the product. So you need to make sure that whatever it is that you present to them is very professionally laid out and it looks nice. Because it's a very tangible expression of your communication skills. Are you able to convey information in a very clear and concise manner? Do you structure information well so it can be easily digestible? quality, your attention to detail, things like grammar and spelling ability, how you formatted, or is it with typos? This is extremely important because a lot of recruiters I've spoken to automatically dismiss a candidate if there's a typo. If you made a spelling mistake, for them it just shows that you as a candidate are not paying attention to detail. And something which is very important is that they tell you, if you're, for example, a consultant and you have errors on your CV, the impression that you give is that if you're having to present to the CEO of a company on the findings of what you've been working on for the last 3 months, it's going to have the same level of lack of attention to detail. So, as I say, a lot of recruiters might actually discount you completely from the process simply because you've got a spelling mistake. So you really need to pay attention to this. And then finally, motivation. I mean, if you've really researched the company and understood what it is that they're looking for, and you've tailored your CV to that particular situation, it shows, that you are analytical, that you really research things, that you do things thoroughly. So understand that this is not only just a bit of paper, that it really reflects a lot of things about who you really are. So what should it include? A CV expresses not only what you did, but so, for example, 4 years as a sales manager, but also how you did it. And so this would imply, for example, a bullet point, identified new players in the market, expanded existing customer base, etc. And it's also what impact you had. So it has to have these 3 elements. And this is, we're talking about results. So increase sales by X or decrease cost by X. So it needs to have these 3 elements. What you did, how you did it, and then what impact that had.